Hello everyone, welcome again. This is going to be the continuation of the last video, which was about the two Ivans. Yes, if for those of you who see this for the very first time, the previous video, the title of this is Have you ever had a fight with a best friend? Something like that. Okay, so I left it kind of in the middle, and I am going to conclude it. First of all, thank you very much for your comments. Obviously, you have enjoyed it. Not many of you. Actually, it didn't reach a lot of people. I don't know how it works, because some of my videos usually are watched by between 100 or 100 and 500 people, something like that. I actually had one that reached 40,000, and I don't know why. I don't know how YouTube puts them up out there. I don't know. I think it depends on the more likes or the more whatever subscriptions and so on, the more they put it out there. I don't know. But this one hasn't been watched by very many people, scarcely 100, I think. But it doesn't matter, because the people who follow all the time. So this is, my audience, as it were, and these are the people that I enjoy doing these videos for. And thank you very much, Deborah, for your donation. You're very, very kind, my dear. Okay, so before I start, though, let me say why I am talking to you about Russian literature, because I think that I owe you an explanation on this. It's not just Russian literature. I will be introducing other things, other books from other literatures, and sharing them with you. But at the moment, I'm kind of binging on Russian literature. I don't know why. It's addictive. I read one and then another and so on. And I have come to the conclusion that actually is a very 19th century literature is very formative. I tell you why. Because it presents human nature very, very raw. You have the serf, and you have the landowner, and you have the people begging in the streets and so on. And this is not our society anymore. It's not Russian society anymore. But it presents us individuals in a very natural state. A good teacher knows that when you're explaining a theory to your young students, the best way for them to understand the theory is to give examples that they can understand, and that's, oh, I see, that's what you mean, of the parables in the Bible and so on, is specific examples. And so we see human nature raw. I tell you a story. When many years ago, when Princess Diana died, I think the very same day Mother Teresa died, or thereabouts. And I remember one of my daughters, my little girl, little at the time, who was crying. And she said, because Princess Diana had a lot of money, Mommy, but Mother Teresa only had a bucket. She only had a bucket. And she was crying because of that. What I'm saying is that at a very early age, let's say from the age of 11 or 12 until 15, 16, if our teenagers, excuse me, were to read this signature, young in their formative years, not afterwards when you already have your own personality, and you may even be vitiated, but at those very early formative years, young people have a very, very strong sense of justice and fairness. And by reading this Russian literature, they have a sense. Oh, let me give you another example. Many years ago, I was watching an interview with someone who looked after animals and loved animals and so on. And he was being interviewed, and he said that for young families with children, it's a great idea to have a pet. Why? Oh, because a pet teaches young children a lot, much more than you can actually see at first sight. He says it teaches them responsibility. You know, they have to take it for, of course, you keep a close eye, but, you know, it's your responsibility to take the little dog for a walk, or make sure that he always has water there. And of course, you're going to keep a close eye, as I said, but nevertheless, they feel this responsibility. It even teaches them in a sort of an indirect way about the facts of life and so on. So, and what is the purpose of teaching? Well, you see, I think, first of all, responsibility is realized, really, when someone becomes aware of being united with others. So it teaches them empathy, like my little girl with Mother Teresa, who only had a bucket. And it's very natural for them because they have this very, very acute sense of fairness. And so they become responsible, and through empathy they will become responsible. And people who are responsible are those who take up responsibility that in society that others are not want to acknowledge, or perhaps they can't if they are more vulnerable than we are. So the other thing that it teaches them is, for young people today, for the West, it shows them self-denial, equaling discipline. Discipline meaning not repression as it is badly understood, but self-discipline, self-control. In other words, you have to do this at 6. Oh, can I do it at 7? No, at 6. That is when you have to do it. It also teaches them that not everything in life is always a bed of roses. I know that this is a cliche, but I also heard someone talking about one of these women with lots of degrees one day, talking about Russian literature, who said, oh, I don't, it's just so boring, all this suffering, and oh my goodness, and well, she missed the point about suffering. It will teach young people to a certain degree of acceptance in the sense of reality, not acceptance in just Eastern abnegation, or just throwing your hands up, oh well, I can't do anything, but looking at reality as it is and then saying, okay, this is the situation, what am I going to do about it? I think that today young people who are not being formed morally, not at school, not in churches, perhaps not even us parents or grandparents are doing a very good job of it. I don't know what it is, but it is very much as if they are, when we are kids, me, this is my ball, I won't share it with anybody. But part of growing up is learning that empathy and that responsibility, and that there are others there, and they're not getting this from anywhere, I don't think. And if you get them to read these lovely stories, don't give them Crime and Punishment is huge and they're going to get bored with it. But these simple short stories by Gogol or Chekhov that they can read when they come home on the bus. They can read a little short story. That is the age, let's say between 11 and 15, when they can really learn from it. Anyway, enough of that, of my sermon. And so I'm going to continue with the story. So for those of you who see this for the first time, perhaps it doesn't make a lot of sense. Go back to the previous video to see what the story is about, okay? But these are two friends who have been friends forever. One is Ivan Ivanovich and the other one is Ivan Nikiforovich, okay? And they fell over one calling the other a goose and the other one not wanting to sell him the right. I'll just remind you of the petitions, okay? And then I'll move on. And I'm not going to read very much more, but I'm going to give you only half of the end, how it all ends. Because there is a message there saying, oh, I'm looking forward to what the two heroes, how they end up. Well, okay, let me remind you first of the first petition to the court. First of all, from Ivan Ivanovich, from a gentleman and landowner of the Mirgorod district, Ivan Perepenko, son of Ivan, a plaint as hereinafter detailed. 1. Ivan Dokhvotchun, son of Nikifor, landowner, known to the whole world for his impious acts, which inspire universal repugnancy and violate the law in every way, did, on the 7th of July of the year of our Lord 1810, inflict a deadly insult with direct bearing on my personal dignity and defamatory towards my rank and name. The aforementioned gentleman, besides being of loathsome appearance, is very quarrelsome by nature, and nearly everything he says is blasphemous or insulting. And this is what he has, as you know, has actually written on the petition to the court. The said gentleman, Ivan, son of Nikifor, when I approached him with friendly intentions, did call me publicly by a most insulting and defamatory epithet, namely a goose, whereas it is known to all and sundry in the whole Mirgorod district that I was never christened after that disgusting animal, and I have no intention of being christened after it in the future. Evidence of my noble origin can be found in the baptismal register in the Church of the Three Bishops, in which is inscribed my date of birth and where my baptism is likewise recorded. Anyone with any pretension to learning will be aware that a goose is a bird and not a human being. This fact must be familiar even to someone who has never attended a seminary. But the aforesaid malicious gentleman, being aware of all these facts, insulted me by using the aforementioned word with the sole intention of bringing the most terrible slander on my name and rank. Number 2. This same indecent and gross gentleman did attempt to damage my property, inherited by me from my father, Ivan Perepenko, clergyman and son of Onesiev, of blessed memory, in that, in flagrant violation of the law, he erected a goose shed directly in front of my porch, with the sole intent of rubbing in the insult. For this aforementioned shed, up to that time, had stood in a very convenient position, and was quite strong into the bargain. But the vile motive of the aforementioned gentleman consisted in this alone, viz., to make a direct witness of indecent actions, for it is known to everyone that no man goes into a shed, and least of all a goose shed, for reasons that can be mentioned in polite society. In carrying out this illegal act, the 2 front posts encroached on my land, handed down to me by my father when he was still alive, Ivan Pererepenko, son of Onisiev, of blessed memory, starting from the granary and extending in a straight line to the place where the women wash their pots. 3. The gentleman described above, whose name inspires nothing but disgust, cherishes in his soul a desire to set fire to me in my own home. Indubitable evidence of this intention is substantiated by the following. Firstly, the above-mentioned malicious gentleman has acquired the habit of leaving his house quite often, which never was the case formerly, on account of his laziness and revolting corpulence. Secondly, in the servants' quarters, adjoining the fence, which encloses the land inherited from my father of blessed memory, Ivan Pererepenko, son of Onisiev, a light can be seen burning for an extraordinary long time every day, which is irrefutable evidence, since hithertofore, as a result of his hateful niggardliness, not only the tallow candle, but even the oil lamp has always been extinguished during the day, and therefore I request that the same gentleman, Ivan Dovvuchan, son of Ivan, guilty of arson and insulting my name and family, of rapacious arrogation of my property, and worst of all, of appending the vulgar and offensive name of goose to my surname, be called to account by the court for full recompense, costs, and damages, that the criminal be clapped in irons and locked up in the town prison, and that judgment may be brought to bear on this my plaint without delay. Written and compiled by Ivan Pererepenko, son of Ivan, gentleman and landowner of Mirgorod. Okay, and so that was his petition, and then the other one also had his petition, and that was Ivan Nikiforovich. And this is his petition. Ivan Dovvuchan, son of Nikifor, a gentleman resided in the Mirgorod district, presents his plaint in connection with the following. 1. Through hateful malice and obvious ill will, Ivan Pererepenko, son of Ivan, who calls himself a gentleman, has been inflicting on me every conceivable kind of harm, perpetrating damage and other pernicious acts which fill me with terror. Yesterday evening, just like a robber and a common thief, armed with axes, saws, chisels, and various locksmith's tools, he climbed into my courtyard and then into my own goose shed, which is situated in the said courtyard. With his own hands, and in the most offensive manner, he chopped it down. On my part, I gave no cause whatsoever for such illegal and outrageous behavior. 2. This same gentleman Pererepenko has been making attempts on my life, and on the 7th ultimo, concealing his real purpose in the most insidiously friendly way, called on me and begged me to let him have my rifle, which was in my room, and with characteristic stinginess offered in exchange several worthless things, his brown cow and 2 sacks of oats. Anticipating his criminal intentions, I tried in every way to put him off, But that same swindler and rogue, Ivan Pererepenko, son of Ivan, swore at me like a peasant, and ever since has nurtured undying hatred towards me. Moreover, the said raging madman and confirmed criminal, Ivan Pererepenko, son of Ivan, is of low birth. Everyone knows that his sister was a prostitute and followed a regiment of chasseurs which was stationed in Mirgorod 5 years ago, and she entered her husband in the register as a serf. His father and mother were also lawless people and incredible drunkards. The above-mentioned robber Pererepenko, in his bestial and venal behavior, surpasses all his family, and under the guise of piety does the most scandalous things. He does not fast, for even on the eve of St. Philip's Day, this same heretic bought a sheep, and the following day ordered his mistress to kill it, trying to justify himself by alleging that he needed tallow fat straight away for the lamps and the candles. In the light of the foregoing, I request that this landed gentleman, a declared robber, church thief, scoundrel, already found guilty of larceny and burglary, be clapped in irons and locked up in the town jail or government prison, and the police court, stripped of his rank and gentleman's status, before being given a thorough flogging and banished to forced labor in Siberia. and that he be ordered to pay costs and damages, and that judgment be carried out forthwith. To this plaint, Ivan Dovgoshkun, son of Nikifor, gentleman of the Mirgorod district, appends his signature below. Okay, so as soon as the secretary had finished, Ivan Nikiforovich grabbed his hat and made for the door. "Where are you off to, Ivan Nikiforovich?" the judge shouted. "Please wait a minute. Stay for tea. Oriosko, what are you standing there for, winking at the clerks? You stupid girl. Now go and bring us some tea." But Ivan Nikiforovich who was frightened at being so far from home territory and to have endured such a dangerous quarantine, had already managed to squeeze through the door, saying as he left, "Don't worry, it's been a pleasure," and with that he slammed the door after him, leaving everyone completely stunned. There was nothing to be done. Both plaints were filed, and just when events looked as if they might turn out interestingly enough, a totally unexpected incident lent them even more piquancy. Just when the judge left the court with his clerk and secretary, and the other clerks were stuffing chickens and eggs, crusts, pies, rolls, and other bits and ends left behind by plaintiffs into a sack, at that very moment, in rushed the brown pig, and to the amazement of the whole assembly, ignoring the pies and the crusts and the sausages, made straight for Ivan Nikiforovich's plaint, which was lying at the table, at the end of the table, with some pages hanging down. Seizing the documents, the brown porker ran off so quickly that not one of the clerks could catch it, despite throwing and hurling inkwells and rulers after it. This extraordinary event led to the most terrible confusion, as no copy of the plaint had been made. The judge, his secretary, and his clerk had a long debate about this unprecedented incident. Finally, they decided to report it to the mayor, since the matter was really the concern of the police. So, letter number 389 was dispatched that very same day, producing a rather curious sequel, as the reader will discover in the next chapter. Next chapter. Let me drink a glass of water. As soon as Ivan Ivanovich had seen to things in the house and had gone out onto his veranda for his customary rest, to his incredible amazement, he saw something red at the gate. This was the red cuff of the mayor's uniform, which, like the collar, was kept highly polished and resembled varnished leather along its edges. Ivan Ivanovich thought to himself, "I'm rather pleased that the mayor, Pyotr Fyodorovich, has come to talk it over." But he was amazed to see that the mayor was walking extremely quickly and waving his arms, which was very unusual for him. He had 8 buttons on his uniform. The 9th had been torn off during a procession at the consecration of some church 2 years before, and the village police had not recovered it, although the mayor always used to ask if the button had been found when he read the daily reports handed in by the police officers. The manner in which these 8 buttons were sewn on was reminiscent of the way peasant women sew beans, one on the right, one on the left, and one on the right, and one on the left. And his left leg had been shot through during the last campaign, and this made him limp and stick his leg out so far to one side that it well nigh cancelled out all the efforts of the other. The faster the mayor sent his infantry into the attack, the less progress he made. Consequently, while he was struggling towards the veranda, Ivan Ivanovich had plenty of time to hazard a guess as to why the mayor was waving his arms so vigorously. The more he thought about it, the more importance he attached to his visit, especially as the mayor was carrying out a new sword. "Good morning to you, Pyotr Fyodorovich," cried Ivan Ivanovich, who, as we have already mentioned, was extremely inquisitive. He could barely suppress his impatience as the mayor stormed the flight of steps up to the veranda, not looking up once, and grumbling at his leg, which he could not swing up each step at one go. "Good day to you, my good friend and benefactor Ivan Ivanovich," answered the mayor. "Please do be seated. I can see you're exhausted. What with that crippled leg of yours?" "My leg," cried the mayor, giving him the kind of look a giant might give a pygmy or a pedant, a dancing master. Then he stretched his leg out and stamped on the floor. This boldness cost him dearly, for his whole body lurched forwards and his nose struck the railings. However, this wise guardian of law and order tried to make out nothing had happened by immediately regaining his balance and filling in his pocket as if he wanted his snuff-box. "I can tell you, my dear friend and benefactor Ivan Ivanovich, that never in all my born days have I ever taken part in such a campaign. I mean that in all seriousness. Take the campaign in 1807. Oh, I could tell you how I once climbed over a fence to see a pretty little German girl, and at this the mayor winked and produced a diabolically roguish smile. "Where have you been today?" asked Ivan Ivanovich, wishing to cut the mayor short and discover the reason for his visit as soon as possible. He was dying to ask what it was that the mayor intended to tell him, but his fine awareness of the ways of the world made him realize that such an approach would be totally indiscreet. And so Ivan Ivanovich had to hold himself in check and wait for the explanation. All this time his heart pounded away with unusual force. "Let me tell you where I've been," the mayor answered. "But first I must inform you that it's very nice weather we are having today." Ivan Ivanovich nearly died when he heard these last words. The mayor continued, "I've come here today to see you on a very important matter." Here his face and bearing took on that same anxious look as when he was storming the steps. Ivan Ivanovich breathed again, trembled feverishly, and came to the point, as was his habit, without further delay. "Important matter? Why is it important? Allow me to explain. May I inform you first of all, my dear friend and benefactor, Ivan Ivanovich, that you, from my point of view, let me explain. I've nothing to do with it, but that's what the law of the country demands. You have violated the rules of law and order." "What are you saying, Pyotr Fyodorovich? I don't understand at all." "Please, Ivan Ivanovich, what do you mean you don't understand? An animal owned by you has stolen a very important document, and all you can say is that you don't understand?" "What animal?" "If I may say so, your own brown pig." "But how am I to blame? Why did the court porter leave the door open?" "But the animal is your property, therefore you are guilty." "Thanks very much for putting me on the same level as a pig." "But I didn't say that, Ivan Ivanovich. As God is my witness, just examine your own conscience. You must know, without a shadow of doubt, that according to the laws of the country, unclean animals are prohibited from roaming around the town, and especially the main streets. You must agree that it's illegal." "God knows what you're talking about. So, it's a great tragedy that the pig run loose." "Please, let me inform you, Ivan Ivanovich, please. It's completely against the law. So, what are we going to do? The authorities say the law must be obeyed. I am not denying that at times even chickens and geese run out into the street, even to the main square. Just think of it. But only last year I issued an order for pigs and goats to be banned from public squares. And I had that order read out at a public assembly." "No, Pyotr Fyodorovich, all I can see is that you are doing your level best to insult me in every possible way." "Oh, you can't really say that, my dear friend and benefactor, that I am trying to insult you. Cast your memory back a little. Last year I never said a word, To you, when you had the roof built a full 2 feet higher than regulations allow, on the contrary, I pretended not to notice at all. My dearest friend, please believe that even at this stage, so to speak, but I have my duty to do what I am required to keep a close watch on public hygiene. Just imagine if suddenly in one of the main streets, to hell with your main streets, all the old women go there to dump all their rubbish as they please. Allow me to inform you, Ivan Ivanovich, that you are insulting me now. True, it does happen sometimes that women throw their rubbish, but as a rule, they dump their rubbish by the fences and the sheds and storehouses. But for a pregnant pig to sneak into the main street or onto the square is so what, Pyotr Fyodorovich? Surely a pig is one of God's creatures. Agreed. The whole world knows you're a man of learning, deeply versed in science, among other subjects. I myself never studied science myself. I only learned to write longhand in my 30th year. As you know, I came up through the ranks. Ivan Ivanovich muttered. Yes, continued the mayor, in 1801 I was serving in the 42nd Regiment as a lieutenant in the 4th Company. This company was commanded by Captain Yeremeyev. At this, the mayor plunged his fingers into the snuff box, which Ivan Ivanovich held up, stirring the snuff. Replied Ivan Ivanovich. But it's my duty to observe the laws of the state, continued the mayor. Do you know, Ivan Ivanovich, that it's a criminal offense to steal an official document from a courtroom? I am well aware of that, and I can tell you a thing or two in that respect. It only concerns people. For example, if you stole a document, but a pig is an animal, one of God's creatures. That may be, but the law says, guilty of theft. I beg you to listen carefully. Guilty. No species is mentioned, or sex, or rank. Therefore, an animal can be adjudged guilty. You can say what you like, but before sentence is passed, the animal must be committed to the charge of the police, just like someone who commits a breach of the peace. No, Pyotr Fyodorovich, coolly retorted Ivan Ivanovich, you can't do that. Think what you like, but I must carry out what the law demands. Are you trying to scare me? Why don't you send that one-armed soldier of yours after it? In that case, I'll tell one of my women to chase him off with a poker. Then he'll get his other arm broken too. I don't dare argue with you. Since you don't feel inclined to give the pig up to the police, then do what you like with it. Kill it for Christmas and make some gammon, or eat it as it is. All I ask, in case you decide to make sausages, is that you send me a couple. You know, those that Gappa, the maid, makes so well with pig's blood and fat. My Agrafena is very fond of them. Well, all right. I'll send you a couple, if you like. I'd be very grateful, my dear friend and benefactor. And now allow me to say just one more thing. I have been instructed by the judge as well as all our friends, to try and bring about a reconciliation between yourself and Ivan Nikiforovich. What? With that bore? Make it up with that lout? I'd like to see the day. Ivan Ivanovich was in a very determined mood. As you wish, replied the mayor, regaling both nostrils with snuff. I daren't offer any more advice, but just allow me to inform you that since you are now at loggerheads, if you can only make it up. But Ivan Ivanovich began to talk about catching quails, which he usually did when he wanted to change the subject. And so the mayor had no option but to go home, having achieved nothing. Anyway, it goes on for a little while longer, and then the second Ivan Nikiforovich, this is the one whose petition was taken by the pig, now proceeds to make another petition, because he feels that the court is in connivance with everything, so with the other Ivan. And for that, and so he makes another petition. He writes another petition. And for this other petition, I'm going to change to another book, and this one is an American translation. And this is better than the previous one. I tell you why, because in this American translation, the other petitions and the other translation, I think, it's just my opinion, I think the author fails to bring up the irony of the whole situation. If you have to deal with irony, the English are better than the Americans. Sorry, Americans, okay. But you haven't been around for too long, and you don't have as many scars, and whenever you had to fight somebody, you always did it, almost always, from a position of power. But when you have a long, long history, sometimes you don't have that military power, and then you have to learn how to deal, and instead of being Tyson, you have to learn how to dance around with, like Ali kind of thing. So the English are better at irony, can we agree with that, than the Americans. But in this other petition, the American translation is much better. Because, okay, he gets the clerk, Ivan Nikiforovich, gets a low-level clerk, the scribbler of the court. Okay, remember that this is 1838. Okay, this is before trains, right? 1838 is certainly before fountain pens. Yes, so he gets this low-level clerk who makes a few pennies on the side. That's okay, we all have to eat. But he carries an inkwell tied to his buttonhole, put together with a shoelace. Anyway, but this low-level clerk, who is not terribly intelligent and really doesn't write very well at all, no punctuation, no nothing, but he knows all the right words to put in an official document. All the wherefores and pursuant and hitherto for and all those big words. And he knows what an official document looks like. And he knows all these words, and he just throws them. It reads, all that you can hear is these words, the big words. Everything else is all over the place, but he puts them all there. And for this, it's the American translation is better. Okay, so this is because of the pig. The pig took the document. And so, this is the petition. To the Mirgorod district court, from the nobleman Ivan, son of Nikifor. Concerning the aforesaid, you're going to hear these words all the time. Concerning the aforesaid, my petition, the which was from me, the gentleman Ivan, son of Nikifor's Doggushum, relating to the gentleman Ivan, son of Ivan Pererepenko, wherein which the district court of Mirgorod has manifested its partiality, and the same brash arbitrariness of the brown pig, which was kept a secret and has reached our ears from persons in no way concerned therewith. Whereto the partiality and connivance, as of evil intention, falls within the jurisdiction of the law, inasmuch as the aforesaid pig is a foolish creature, and thereby the more apt for the stealing of papers. Wherefrom it is evidently apparent that the pig frequently aforementioned could not otherwise than have been incited to the same by the opposing party, the self-styled gentleman, Ivan, son of Ivan Pererepenko, the same having been already detected in housebreaking, attempted murder, and sacrilege. But the aforesaid Mirgorod court, with its characteristic partiality, manifested its tacit connivance, without the which connivance the aforesaid pig could by no manner of means have been admitted to the stealing of the paper, inasmuch as the Mirgorod district court is well provided with service, to which intent it is sufficient to name one soldier present on all occasions in the reception room, who, though he has a cross eye and a somewhat useless arm, is yet fully capable of driving out a pig and striking her with a stick. Wherefrom the connivance, The connivance of the aforesaid Mirgorod court thereto is proven, and the partition of the ill-gotten profits therefrom on mutual terms is abundantly evident. The aforesaid robber and gentleman, Ivan, son of Ivan Pererepenko, is manifestly the scoundrelly accomplice therein. Wherefore, I, the gentleman Ivan, son of Nikifor, do herewith inform the said district court that if the petition above mentioned shall not be recovered from the aforesaid brown pig or from the gentleman Pererepenko, her accomplice, and if proceedings shall not be taken upon it in accordance with justice and in my favor, then I, the gentleman Ivan, son of Nikifor, will lodge a complaint with the higher court concerning such illegal connivance of the aforesaid district court, transferring the case thereto with all due formalities. Ivan, son of Nikifor, gentleman of the Mirgorod district. Okay, so that is the petition. Now, the story continues. I'm just going. It's really very, very funny. They will try to. The court then gets nervous because he's going to appeal to a higher court, and they get very nervous about it, and they try to reconcile the two, and they have a dinner, and it's all kinds of things. You have to read the story. Sorry. And they almost succeeded one time. The mayor had a party. They connived to bring the two together, different doors, different things. And then there were many guests there, and half of them were pushing one Ivan towards the other, and the other guests were pushing the other Ivan against the, anyway, to bring them close together, asking them to shake hands and forget the whole thing. And they almost succeeded, to the point where they were facing each other, and one took out the snuff box and said, "Would you like some?" And the other one took the snuff box and said, "Would you care to?" But a mistake was made, and that was that Ivan Nikiforovich said, "Well, perhaps I was wrong to call you a goose." Oh my goodness. No, the whole thing started again. And then you have to read the story. They never really reconciled. But it finishes like this. The narrator, as it were, he was still a child then. He lived in that village for a long time, and then he left. And now he says, 5 years ago, I happened to be passing through Mirgorod. I had picked a bad time. It was autumn, and the weather was miserable, damp and misty with mud everywhere. But my heart started beating violently when I approached Mirgorod. The memories that place holds for me. It was 12 years since I had last visited the town, where the two men who were quite inseparable had lived together in friendship, which was truly touching to see. How many important people had died since then. Judge Ivanovich had passed away, and anyway, he continues about all the changes. It was a high holiday. I ordered the covered wagon to stop at the church and entered very quietly so that no one would notice. But I need not have worried. The church was almost deserted. There was hardly anyone there. Evidently the mud had frightened away even the most pious. The candles looked strangely unpleasant in that gloomy, rather sickly light. The dark porch had a melancholy look, and the oblong windows with their circular panes were streaming with tears of rain. I went into the porch and approached a venerable-looking old man with grey hair. "Sir, can you tell me if Ivan Nikiforovich is still alive?" At that moment, the lamp in front of the icon flared up, and the light shone straight into the old man's face. You can imagine how astonished I was to see those familiar features again. Yes, it was Ivan Nikiforovich himself. But how he had changed. "Are you keeping well, Ivan Nikiforovich? Goodness, how you've aged." "Yes, I have indeed. I've just got back from Poltava town." "What's that? You went to Poltava on a day like this yourself?" "What else can I do? There is a lawsuit pending." At this, I could not help sighing. Ivan Nikiforovich noticed and said, "Don't worry. I've had news from a reliable source that the case will be decided in my favor." I shrugged my shoulders and went off to see what I could find out about Ivan Ivanovich. Ivan Ivanovich is here, someone said, over there, in the choir. They were both in the same church, together but unable to speak to one another. Yes, over there, in the choir. Then I saw a gaunt figure. Was that really Ivan Ivanovich? His face was covered with wrinkles and his hair had turned completely white, but he was still wearing the same short fur coat. After we had greeted each other, Ivan Ivanovich turned to me with that cheerful smile which suited his funnel-shaped face so well and said, "Have you heard the good news?" "What news?" I asked. "My case will be decided tomorrow, without fail. The High Court said it's absolutely certain." I heaved an even deeper sigh, hurriedly made my farewell, as I had some very important business to attend to, and climbed into my covered wagon. Some skinny horses, known as the post-haste type in Mirgorod, made an unpleasant squelching as they trod in the grey mass of mud. The rain poured down on someone who was sitting on the horse box with a mat over him. The dampness soaked right through me. The wretched turnpike and its sentry box, with an old soldier sitting there mending his grey armour, slowly passed by. Those fields again, with black ploughed patches in places, showing green in others, the drenched crows and jackdaws, monotonous rain and a tearful sky without one ray of sunlight. It's a dreary world, gentlemen. That's the end of the story. It talks about justice too, and think about this. Justice and retribution and punishment and revenge and avenging others and so on. When we, in our civilized society, gave the power to the state to settle differences between us, so that if you insulted me, I wouldn't go and punch you on the nose, and if you insulted me, I wouldn't kick you with a stick. In order to avoid each one of us taking the law onto ourselves, we gave that to the state, and the state, through the courts of justice, decided that, don't worry, if you have been harmed, we will take care of it, we will punish the criminal, and you will be compensated, and so on. But what happens when that fails down, or when that fails or doesn't work properly? Because compensation or retribution sometimes doesn't necessarily answer that cry from the heart that demands justice. If your son is killed, the criminal goes to prison and you may be compensated perhaps, but your son is dead, and there is the heart cries out for justice, and retribution or compensation or punishment sometimes doesn't deal with that. That is a very, we could go and talk forever about different kinds of justice, retributive justice, all these theories, sociological theories, but it leaves a sort of a hole in your heart. And in all the societies, they dealt with it themselves. The court, you see, they filed the complaints and everything, but the court did everything. They filed it, they stamped it, they tied it up, and then they left it on a shelf. The way they dealt with their own sense of justice was, as you see at the end, never to speak to one another again, close enough perhaps to be in the same places, even in the same church, but their sense of justice, I have been hurt, you heard, and so on, not allowing them to speak, and to each other. And that is what happened, as I said in my last video, really, to my grandfather and my aunt, both drawing water from the same well and never ever speaking to each other, not one word, for 50 years. It's one way of dealing with it. I don't have the answers, but let me know in your wonderful comments what you think of it. Okay, I'll leave you for today. Thank you so... Oh, if you're still with me and you haven't subscribed, please do so. It helps me. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.